Welcome, everybody. My name is Eberhard from Faber. I'm working in the field of IT service security. Nevertheless, this webinar may also be interesting for people working in other complex fields. So the webinar delivers hands-on practical advice. So it outlines a couple of methods for organizing, orchestrating, and optimizing IT service security. So it's about managing IT security in a large IT organization. Okay, I will start with a short description of the philosophy of the Zero Outage Industry Standard Initiative or Association, because that's a basis for everything I will present later. So our philosophy is zero defect security. What does it mean and where does it come from? So we deliver IT security as a quality. So it's a matter of quality management, actually. So that in the first place, it means focus on quality. That means focus on customer. And the customers are for a large IT organization. These are the user organizations. So customer focus is something which is key, but not this is not the essence. So when we talk about quality, now we have an echo. So the essence is that quality must be produced and not monitored. So you cannot only control this and verify if you have a quality after you have produced something. It must be produced, so it must be part of the provisioning process. And quality is achieved by shaping circumstances during this provisioning process, which covers everything. So the early design, the implementation, and also then operating the IT service and provisioning it to user organizations. So this is the essence, that we shape the circumstances. And everything I will talk about in the next half an hour is about how we can ensure and shape and produce circumstances that produce quality and, in the end, IT security as a specific thing. Okay, let's now step in. I will present a couple of methods, methodologies, or principles, or whatever we want to call it. So first is very basic. Large IT organizations require an organization orchestration scheme. So quality comes not automatically. You have to produce this by shaping the circumstances, and this is because this is why you're requiring a scheme for this. But why? So first of all, obviously today's IT is very complex, and securing this IT is complex too. There's a multiple of technology, and there are many topics, lots of aspects. Several parties are involved along the supply chain, like suppliers, but also user organizations, customers of the IT organization. So this is one thing. So you need to think how to organize this and how to put this together and make sure that every party knows what the party is expected to produce, what it is responsible for, and what technology, what topic, and what aspect is relating to these activities by a specific party. You could say that there are a lot of standards out there, like the ISO 27000 series of standards. Most of these standards doesn't help you to really manage and organize, orchestrate, and organize and optimize the delivering of secure IT services. It tells you what you do, what you have to do, but they provide only little information about how to organize and orchestrate these multitude of activities. There's a further aspect which is missing from most of these standards, and these are the business challenges. So costs, for instance. So it assumes that you have all the resources being required at hand, which is practically or virtually in no organization the case. You have limitations or costs for resources. You have limited workforce. You have limited skills. And of course, you have challenging customers and regulation, legislation, a lot of requirements which need to be met. I have to keep the pace and provide competitive advantages with delivering secure IT services. So these are business challenges, and this makes it even more interesting and challenging to care for organizing or orchestrating these multitude of IT security aspects. So the first advice is maintain your corporate standards. So not only refer to external standards, we will come to this later on as a last slide, but maintain your own corporate standards and set up your own organization and orchestration scheme. That's really essential that you start with your own thing. Then bring all the things which you want to be obeyed, like technical or actions or organizational measures, into a unique form as a security measure, so that they all look the same, that they can be found by the employees. The clear advantage of having these corporate standards is that they are clearly binding. So you see the logo of your own organization. So it's for sure for everybody working in the organization that they're binding. They're also stable. You have full control about continuous improvement and everything about this, which is not the case when you only refer to external standards. Also, obeying, implementing, observing the standards is much easier because these corporate standards can be formulated in a way that they meet specific requirements and the specific circumstances of the business of this organization. Okay, the next thing is how to organize the scheme, and we're now going into a little bit more detail on what is this scheme about. Of course, we need security documentation or security standards. The first advice is these need to be hierarchically organized right from the beginning. And the second is we need to consider dual use, which I will explain in a minute. Hierarchically organization, here you see a picture that there's an upper level and a medium level and a lower level. It doesn't matter so much how many levels you have, but the hierarchical organization of these security documentation on standards is very important. First of all, from the top to the bottom, we have more details. So we have the ability with this hierarchy to systematically derive what we are requiring on the lower levels. So that's this first thing. The second thing is also that when we have these different layers, each layer can serve different purposes. For instance, on the top, you have the high-level things, which are decisions by the organization, by the management, top management of the organization, what they want to achieve. And on the lowest level, you have all these specific things for executing, for implementing, designing, and so on, IT security. So work instructions, technical concepts, design things, configuration list, all the nuts and bolts documents. That is also from that one reason that with this hierarchy, each level serves a different purpose and have a different target group. Whereas the upper levels are more for managing the security, taking decisions, principal decisions about IT service security. The lower levels are more executing things, implementing things. So we have different target groups. Our advice is that do not mix the layers. So define the layers, and then each document should be in one layer and not in multiple layers. And this is because we have these different target groups and different purposes. And then some specific dual use. So you see here in the middle, there is a layer which is called the orchestration layer. What does it mean? So in the middle, we need one level with a lot of security standards maybe, where we still have an overview. We can understand what's happening, because from the top to the bottom in this hierarchy, the number of documents will increase, and also due to the increasing level of detail, there are a lot of aspects, and the amount of information is dramatically increasing from the top to the bottom. That means on the lowest level, you're not really able to manage security because it's too complex, too much information, too many aspects. And this orchestration layer is exactly this layer, and that's why it is placed in the middle, why you have enough detail, but not too much detail to be able to manage security actively and take decisions which are relevant then also for the implementation. This orchestration layer has also a further, first of all, is for managing, for overseeing, for actively taking decisions about the implementation of IT service security, but it's also for dual use. And that means it serves two purposes. So the documents here are, first of all, a promise to the user organizations or to the customers, because they need to be informed about the security of the IT services they are using. We will discuss this more in a minute. But also, and that's the other thing, they need to be refined by these lower levels and then executed, obeyed, implemented by the IT service provider or the IT organization. So then this is dual use. Why is it dual use? So when you use the same documents for both purposes, for assuring customers, which we call fulfillment here, and for implementing the security in the IT service, there's no risk that you have different things and they diverge and there are contradictions between the implementation and the promise or the promise to the customer. So dual use. Dual use also, and we go now a little bit into more detail, we should in general consider two types of compliant things which relate to this dual use. You see here the pyramid in a little bit different form, and you see the orchestration layer for this dual use in the middle. So there are two purposes, and I just mentioned that it's attainment and fulfillment. So assuring customers, that's about fulfillment, and implementation of IT service security, which is called attainment. And these are complex activities. So for instance, in the attainment, you have to manage the demands from the market, from the user organizations and customers. So that's first, so demand or requirements management. Then the standards needs to be defined and maintained. Then somebody needs to ensure that the standards are really observed and implemented. And finally, so the implementation may be verified in order to learn, these have been observed, and I can assure that the customers will receive the security they are expected and they are promised to get. And this is then part of the second area of activity, which is called fulfillment here. And this is also complex. This includes procedures for informing customers, maybe in sales or internal activities for informing customers, for negotiations, for contracting, because these contracts will also say something about IT service security. And also maybe that it is required to verify if the expectations or even requirements, maybe from request for proposals, from the customers are really fulfilled with what the IT organization is planning to deliver. So here in the middle, you have seen something which is called a taxonomy. So in order to manage all these things in the fulfillment and in the attainment area, so demand management, defining standards, implementing, verifying, comparing these, communicating these, you need to split the overall complex area of IT service security into different parts because there are many, many aspects. And this is exactly the idea behind having such a taxonomy, which you see here on the right-hand side. It could be shaped differently, but it is a graphical organization, an orchestration scheme in the orchestration layer, which is each of these areas is one aspect or one area of activity. This eases that the people being responsible for implementing the standards can find their standards and know what they are talking about. And it also eases communication to customers so that we have a common language, talk about specific areas of responsibilities to specific aspects of IT security. So the taxonomy is a means for communication, but also for division of labor. So when we now take a closer look into this taxonomy, we will learn, and that's the next advice we will want to give, is that we need to, in principle, have two groups of standards which need to be maintained, and second thing is the secured by different approach. But let's start with the first thing, that we need to create and maintain two types of standards. In general, everything which relates to security should be put into form or be transformed into documents or IT security standards. But we need to have two groups because there are two different kinds of things. First of all, and that's group A, and this is the lower part here in the taxonomy, which showed up on the right-hand side. This is technology. So, and here we have different areas or different types of components which are usually built together and in order to deliver an IT service. You need databases, you need servers, you need an application, you need networks. There are a couple of elements which needs to be put together, integrated in a specific way, which is IT service specific, and then deliver the functionality, which is called utility and ITIL, and just service in ISO 20000. So the group of standards in this area here in group A, this explains how these components are securely configured and securely integrated, and what kind of security measures needs to be implemented in these components and systems to care for and to ensure IT service security. That's one thing. But also interesting and not even less important is the upper part, which is group B here, which is called the practices. So this is everything which tells how to achieve that these things here in the lower part are really made secure. And it starts with the first design decisions of the architecture, and then it continues with the implementation, but it's not limited to the design and its implementation. Also during the operations, it's very important that security is maintained so that the bugs are removed, patches are applied to do so, configurations are changed so that IT service security is continuously observed. So, and these are split, these two areas. Why is it split into a upper group and a lower group? Because all these practices should also be standardized and then uniquely applied to all the technologies below. This is a way for industrialized IT production in general, and we reuse this for IT service security so that we have common standards, common processes and practices, and these should be applied to all the technology areas, to all the components and systems we have in the lower part. Moreover, and now I come to secured by by definition approach. These security measures should be integrated in the real life, so in the provisioning processes of IT. Why? So the security is not added as a plaster at the end of when the IT service is ready. You need to integrate this during the process. I started with saying that we consider IT service security as a quality. So quality cannot be produced at the end of the production process. It needs to be a practice in all the activities along the life cycle of the IT service. And the guiding processes are the IT provisioning processes. And the best way to care for security is to integrate the IT security aspects, so caring for integrating IT security in these IT provisioning processes. And many larger organizations are using ITIL or ISO 20000 as a guideline for defining their IT service provisioning process. You will start with design and implementation, and also covers, of course, operations and all the improvement activities in there. And the security needs to build in there. So the existing processes and practices for developing, deploying, monitoring, and updating the IT are used. And in these processes, also IT security is observed. So that's the best way, that's cost effective, and it really works, and we call this principle secured by definition. Okay, so I was mentioning that we need to have this hierarchy and a lot more. So defining the standards, that's really critical, because that's the basis for these are providing the guidelines for all the thousands of people maybe in your IT organization who should care for IT service security. That's why this advice is about the structure, that you define a structure for the standards or documents, and care for modularity. That's the first thing. And then we need a maintenance scheme, a maintenance system. Let's start with the structure. What does it mean? Here are examples. So you can talk 2 hours about this. I will make it very short. First of all, it is a good practice or recommendation to detail all the topic areas defined in the taxonomy in individual security measures. But then you have a concrete description which always looks the same, so and it's easier to understand and to implement. When we have a topic, so that means a group of security measures, then these should be detailed in a separate documents. Remember that we during the discussion of the hierarchy, we have these different target groups, we have different purposes, we have different areas. So when we have these mixed documents, then we have big documents, long documents, nobody will read. So in order to be a target group specific, it's best practice to have separate documents for different target group and different purposes and different areas of activities. Also, relating to the purposes, it's a good practice to define document types. So we again have for the same target group maybe, and for the same area, for the same security aspects or area of activity, we have different concepts. For instance, tutorials, which are used once to learn how to do some things. Then there are checklists, which are actively used on a day-to-day basis. There are concepts which are provided once and then only used during the implementation and so on and so forth. So this separation and definition of document types also helps to make it easier to read these documents and easier to use the documents. Yeah. Also, best practice is prescribed document structure. So if you look into a document, and it's always have the same internal structure with the introduction and then the references at the end, but maybe more than this, so that it starts explaining the environment and the how to use, and it refers to everything we had above. So what target group, what purpose, what area, and so on. That's much easier to utilize these documents than if any document would look different. Okay, modularity is important. So I just said that separate documents, make them small and short. If you do that in the right way, it is modular, and that keeps it maintains the flexibility, and it also reduces costs for modifications, because we have to modify our security documentation virtually every month due to the technical progress, due to different risk scenarios or whatever it is. And if you have large monolithic documents, it's very hard to do these changes. With modular and smaller documents, it's much easier to modify and modify these documents, so that also makes you flexible and reduces costs. Modularity, also I mentioned this, also helps to create target group specific documents, and therefore eases understanding and using of the documents. I mentioned this, and this is sometimes forgotten, if you really care for modularity, this can be the basis for assigning responsibilities. And it helps you to organize the division of labor within the whole supply chain, also with customers, with suppliers, and also within the IT organization, that everybody knows what to do and comes right to the document he or she is requiring. Yeah, then the maintenance scheme. So if you have these large number of documents, as a question how to manage these, you need to have a central library, so that if somebody is looking for something, then it's clear. Look it up in the library, and a specific server in a document management system. So there's everything is available. And by the way, the taxonomy and the hierarchy helps you to organize these documents so that it's that everybody is able to find what he or she is looking for. Maintenance is an issue. I mentioned this. We need to update and maintain this library. And here the advice is that we need to have an advisory board. So people continuously and exclusively working on the maintenance of these corporate standards. They know about the structure. They know about the document types. They know about the modularity and all these aspects, and they can give advice to authors, and also indicate if there's some inconsistency found, and so on. They can care for the quality and ensure approvals and whatever is needed. So an editorial board is highly recommended. The last thing is, I talked a little bit, a lot about corporate standards, and you may wonder, there are ISO standards out there. There are a lot of handouts you can find in the internet. How are these used? Of course, we are talking about the management system here and not about single security measures, but how to manage these external sources. Let's start with this question. And for this, we need to have what we call an endorsement framework. So external sources, such laws, regulations, norms, standards, handbooks, manufacturer information, industry standards, whatever it is, are very useful. And we encourage every organization to take advantage of these things because they are mostly tested and proven, they are widely accepted, and use these as an input for your corporate standards. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Take them and use them. That's one reason. But also the user organizations, and that's another reason to incorporate these security practices and security measures from these external resources. Because the user organizations, the customers of the IT organization, must obey these laws and meet the requirements from industry norms or industry standards or whatever it is. That's why even if we are also if we have these corporate standards, we need to know if our standards, and this is shown here on the right hand side, are suitable to meet the requirements from these laws, regulations, norms, external standards, whatever. Because user organizations or the customers have to adhere with this. And this is exactly what the endorsement framework is for. That's a really that's a high effort activity to analyze these external sources and match them to the internal standards, so the corporate standards, provide input to them, manage the changes, change the wording and the phrasing for them, adapt them to meet the internal requirements of the IT organization, and so forth. So that's why we call it endorsement framework. But the key is that we need to get the information from this in order to learn and to be able to also meet these external sources or these standards when the corporate standards are being implemented. But that also means that we have to obey these two compliant things which are mentioned earlier. So fulfillment, that was a question we promised, the IT organization promised something to the user organization, to the customer, and must ensure that the customer's requirements are met. If the customer's requirements relate to an industry norm, then I, as an IT, as I've coming from the IT organization, must know that my corporate standard, implementing this, obeying this, observing it, is suitable to meet this external standard, which is important for the customer. But also internal, and that's the input section. If I want to obey this, then I have to ensure that everything which is required with this internal standard is really implemented as a corporate standard in the IT services being delivered. Okay, last advice is very short. Interface to and use your your information security management system. So everything which I explained in this short presentation is an add-on which helps you organizing, orchestrating, and optimizing IT service security. But it's not everything, but it's about IT service security. So, and usually large organizations have an ISMS on top of it, which provides the necessary resources, for instance, which clarifies basic procedures, sets basic guidelines for information security, and provides a governance scheme. All this should be utilized and reused, and so that the IT service security, as shown here on the right, uses the ISMS as a basis. Okay, there were a lot of input, I hope, helpful things which may help you to to manage IT service security in a larger IT organization. With that, the last page is some sources about this where you can read more. And you can also visit the Zero Outage Industry Standard web page. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.